In the intricate maze of financial life, debt often appears as both a tool and a trap. Types of debt vary, from student loans with fixed or variable rates to credit card debt's high interest, mortgages' diverse options, and personal loans' unique terms. Navigating this world requires a compass, debt management strategies. The debt snowball method rolls momentum by clearing small debts first, while the debt avalanche targets high-interest debts for potential savings. Debt consolidation simplifies, but beware of hidden fees. Interest rates fluctuate, with fixed offering stability and variable tied to market whims. Repayment plans must align with your financial landscape, and prepayment strategies can reduce interest. The journey through debt is not just numbers. It's a psychological battle, a behavioral change. Support systems and professional guidance can be your allies. In conclusion, debt is not a dark alley, but a path that with wisdom, strategy, and determination leads to financial liberation. I think the debt statistics in America are scary, quite frankly. And one that really stood out to me is I saw a figure that 71% of retirees have debt not related to their mortgage, with an average balance of almost $20,000. I think that's according to a 2023 State of Retirement Finances. Roger, how do you tell people, how should they prioritize paying off debt?
I have to be careful because I deal with a very, very small subset of people that listen to my show or that I work with. The vast majority of people that are retired, Social Security is their primary income. And they have little to no financial assets. And debt usually will come about because of the car or the air conditioning or a health event. And they have no other place to turn. So how does someone navigate that? I don't think I'm versed enough to even speak intelligently on it. I don't know. I mean, because there's only so much someone can do. Where I have seen debt happen, used poorly, is when it's used to enhance a lifestyle and wanting to live into money you don't have. And that can happen. Doesn't matter how many zeros you have behind your name. I've seen billionaires go broke, is when it's used to enhance and put rocket fuel on spending because of I need it now, or I have a dream that isn't feasible, but I won't give it up. It's a reasonable tool to use, but it's like any tool, it can be used to really destroy your life.
As an advisor, is that just requires a tough conversation with them as a third party?
My job as an advisor is to be a decision-making partner within the context of, so we have pillars that we build. What do we want? Is that feasible given the resources you have? How do we make it resilient? And when they come with a decision, let's say, actually just answered a question, should I borrow against my investment portfolio to buy a second house? I just answered on, and I went through a framework of how do you think through that? My job, as I see it, is to walk through prioritizing for themselves what's most important. And depending on what pathway they want to take, let's say buy this second house with borrowing against a portfolio, what the ramifications might be now, but also down the path. And is there a more elegant way to accomplish the true thing that they want? Let's say the second house. I'm there to reflect to them the potential consequences of decisions, give them my judgment, and help them prioritize for themselves.
Lynette, what kind of strategies do you see helps people to manage or eliminate their debt?
Well, having been in debt myself, and you mentioned that I have a New York Times bestseller called Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. And I wrote that book almost 20 years ago after I got out of $100,000 in credit card debt. And again, I've coached so many people out of debt since then. Again, The first thing is to realize why you got into debt. Because for so many people, if you might fix the problem, you might, give them a solution or a strategy that works. And it's like, oh, great, I'm out of debt. But then a year or two later, they're right back into debt. So what I know now, unequivocally, again, from just, helping countless folks in this area, is that people, generally speaking, fall into debt because they fit into one of two categories. One is that they're classic overspenders or poor money managers. Nobody's taught them. They're kind of like do. They're spending, they're living their lives. And they're like, oh wow, I didn't even realize. Well, I'm deficit spending here, and I have all these credit card bills. So they're kind of oblivious to the state of affairs, and they're not paying attention to the red flags that are going on, right? And usually they don't pay attention to the red flags until an event happens. Oh my God, I lost my job. Now it's like, they can't pay the bills or whatever. So that's the first group of people. The second group of folks who fall into debt are people who have been victimized by what I call the dreaded D's. They've fallen into hard times like downsizing from a job, divorce, death of a loved one, maybe the principal breadwinner in the family, disability, disease, natural disasters that they've gone through. They've had damaged credit. They've had debt of various kinds. And then the last two factors are what I call dollar deficits. I'm broke. I have no savings. Maybe I'm behind on my retirement savings. And then the final one is discrimination, which can also pack a financial punch at various levels. So, hey, you know what? As it turns out, you mentioned, Andy, that I've written 15 books. I have not even announced this yet. So I'm breaking news here on your show. I actually have just finished book 16, which is being published January 1st, 2024 by John Wiley and Sons. And the book is called Bounce Back, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Resilience. And it's all about how do you overcome setbacks like these 10 dreaded D's that I just mentioned. So for me, as a person who's been in debt and as an individual who's helped others get out of debt, I first try to get people to address what was the issue that drove them into debt. Because honestly, if they're a poor money manager and nobody's taught them how to handle credit and debt responsibly, they could, take home equity out of their house or something and then pay off the credit card bills. And then they're going to have a bigger mortgage, but then they're going to have credit card bills that are at a zero balance. And then they're going to go right back out there and spend. And then they're going to have credit card debt again. So it's not doing them a service. The issue is, let's get to the root cause of why and what got you into debt. And then let's address that. So if it's because you've, lost a job or you've been under earning on the job, how can we address that? If it's that you're living above your means, especially for a lot of folks, Roger, I appreciate the candor in saying that, frankly, a lot of his clients, they're not going to be, at the edge in terms of struggling financially, et cetera. They're not going to be among the masses of the 7, 8, out of 10 Americans who, don't have savings at a reasonable level, who have massive amounts of debt. Pew researchers say that 80% of all Americans owe somebody something. They have a mortgage, a credit card payment, a student loan, an auto loan, et cetera. So I can appreciate that his clients are obviously higher net worth, have more savings, have financial assistance, right? But for the masses who don't, some of them have to actually make tough choices. So, you look at things like some of them need to relocate. They're in debt because they're housing burdened. They're paying 40 and 50% of their paycheck towards the roof over their heads. So some of them, if they say, I can't possibly move out of, Chicago or LA or New York or wherever they're living, it might be, okay, well, can you downsize? Can you get a smaller place, a less expensive place? Can you take on a roommate? Can you live with family? So some of the big expenses have to be looked at, because if you free up some of that cash flow, then you'll be able to put that money towards debt. Another strategy, and then I'll take a pause here because I know I've been going on for a minute, but you absolutely have to use windfalls appropriately. So a windfall is any lump sum of money that comes outside of your normal paycheck. So if you get, a tax refund check, a lot of people got that stimmy money, they got those stimulus checks. If you get an inheritance, if you get divorce proceedings, if you get life insurance funds, from somebody, a bonus, a year-end bonus on the job, an uncle just, a rich uncle throws some money your way, whatever. All of those are forms of windfalls, and many of them can be, pretty significant. For the average American, getting a $3,000 plus tax refund check, which is about the norm, is significant. And that's something that they could use to put towards their debt or certainly build savings at the very least.
Lynn, can I ask a question on this?
Yes.
I know that because I've had my own personal experience with that in my 20s and 30s for sure, where I was on the edge because I didn't learn, right? Even as an advisor, I didn't learn. And I only thought my income would go up, right? Because it always did. I'm on my career. But one thing I personally experienced was once I came to terms with that, and when you're dealing with, you have to have someone, sort of the horse to water, someone that wants to deal with it. I know one element that I had to deal with was to essentially go through a grieving process of what I had done in this case, so I could get to work of actually being proactive and not just beat myself up, that hammer again. Have you found that, as you've worked with people and in your own experience, you sort of have to work on forgiving yourself to some extent so you can actually be more proactive?
Great question, Roger. And the short answer is yes, absolutely. There's so much shame. There's so much guilt. There's so much regret. There's so many people who beat themselves up. And, those emotions, of course, they're allowed to feel. But then we want to get to the point where you're taking positive, appropriate steps to counteract or to mitigate the previous poor choices or whatever it is that they are regretting. But yes, and that's why in Bounce Back, one of the things that I talk about is a framework for dealing with the emotional side first before you even get to the tactical and practical on the how-to of the money side. And a lot of it is actually about self-care and about forgiving yourself and about recognizing where you need support and being kind to yourself and not so judgmental. Because honestly, I do think that so much of personal finances, there's so much judgment, and people are already internalizing. They may not articulate it, but they have this sense. I've had people to just bawl and just cry and tell me, oh my God, I made a mess of these things. I've had people be suicidal and tell me life is not worth living. I messed this up so bad. I don't deserve to be here. Just a whole host of things, right? So enormous amounts of, really deep feeling that they're going through. But I think that the key is, to the extent that we can take away some of that shame and some of that judgment, and we can just notice what is, right? And just say, here's where I am today, and I notice that I've had a pattern, for example, of helping out everybody in my family and giving until it hurts. And now I don't have enough money for my own retirement, or I don't have enough savings, or I drove myself into debt because I was paying this person's bill, somebody who's grown, full-bodied, able-bodied, adult, right? So you have to give people time to grieve, as you said, time to address, and yes, that clarity to look in the mirror and see what is. The reason that I agreed with Tiffany about the clarity being kindness is, a lie is kind of hard to come back from, like just think about if somebody lies to you. It's like, oh, the trust has been destroyed. You're really upset about it. You feel like, well, what else did you lie to me about, right? So what about when you're lying to yourself? Then you start to have self-doubt. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust your own judgment. You don't trust your ability to make decisions. So the flip side of that is to say, listen, I am going to walk in truth. It might not be pretty, but I can at least deal with the truth. I can say, you know what? Here's the reality. And this is a true story. This is what I did. I said, Lynette, you know, you have all these credit card bills. It's time to write them all down and just see what's the bottom line. How much do you owe? So I started listing out credit card after credit card. And lo and behold, I saw that I had 100,000, just a little over 100,000 in credit card debt. This was back in 2003. No, 2001. I'm sorry. 2001 is when I kind of started the debt payoff plan. And then I finished it in 2003. Then I wrote zero debt in 2004. But you can imagine the shock on my face when I said, holy cow, I've got $100,000. It was because I was just like, I wasn't really paying attention. I knew I had all these credit cards, and I knew my balances kept going up and up. But until I looked in the mirror, it was like, okay, that's my wake up call. It's time to do something about this.
I love that. Being kind to yourself. And I just read a book over the weekend, Dopamine Nation. It's not about money. It's about that everything is so fast that we have, like, everything is accessible from our phone, and everybody's just looking for, you know, instant, like, positive feedback, and nobody wants pain. But one of the takeaways from that book was radical honesty is an important core value. And as I read it, I think that that applies to one's life in general, but also to your money, that it does require being honest with yourself and being kind with yourself. And I look forward to your book, Lynette, about resilience. If everybody can just stick with us a little longer, I know we're going over on time, but let's wrap it up with the final segment.